Welcome to Maritime Pakistan, your gateway to the fascinating world of oceans and the opportunities they present to every one of us. Our goal is to explore the shared heritage of the seas and oceans to achieve global prosperity. And that mission takes us on a journey today, all the way across the world to the ancient Caribbean. We're going to be exploring the book, The Sea in History, The Ancient World, and we're zeroing in on the 5th chapter, The Taíno of the Caribbean, 6,000 Years of Seafaring and Cultural Development.
All right, let's jump right in. Picture this. It's 1492, and Columbus lands in the Americas. The people who met him there, in the Caribbean, were the Taíno. But they were anything but newcomers. No, their ancestors had been mastering the Caribbean Sea for thousands of years. So the big question has always been, how on earth did they do it? How did they manage to populate island after island across this huge expanse of water?
And you really have to get this. The Taíno weren't some simple, isolated tribe. They were the result of more than 6,000 years of migration by sea. By the time Columbus showed up, they had built these incredibly complex societies, with powerful chiefdoms, especially on islands like Hispaniola and Puerto Rico. They even had extensive trade networks. This was a civilization that was really on the move.
Okay, so that begs the question, right? If they were so advanced, where did they come from? How did they manage to settle this whole string of islands in the first place? Well, for the longest time, the explanation people went with seemed pretty straightforward, just by looking at a map. This was the old stepping stone theory. The thinking was, these early seafarers probably had pretty basic canoes and limited skills. So it made sense that they would have just hopped from one island to the next, never really losing sight of land. It kind of seems logical when you look at it, like connecting the dots on a map.
But, and this is a huge but, here's the massive flaw in that whole line of thinking. It treated the ocean like it was just a big, flat, blue parking lot. It completely ignored the real-world forces at play, the powerful winds, and the massive ocean currents that could either push you exactly where you wanted to go or send you way off course.
And this is where the story gets really cool. To figure this out, you can't just stare at a map. You have to understand the sea itself in all its dynamic glory. And to do that, modern archaeologists turn to an absolutely amazing new tool. So, how do you test a journey that happened thousands of years ago across a constantly changing sea? I mean, you can't just jump in a dugout canoe and see what happens, right? Well, the answer is you build a kind of digital time machine. And it's called Computer Voyage Simulation. Basically, it's a super smart program that lets you launch thousands of virtual canoes into a digital replica of the ancient Caribbean Sea. By plugging in all the real-world data about wind and currents, you can start to figure out the actual mathematical probability of making it from one point to another.
And here's how it works, broken down. First, you feed the system incredibly detailed data on winds and currents from the US Navy, top-notch stuff. Then, you tell the computer what kind of boat you're dealing with, a traditional dugout canoe. Step 3, you set the rules. Are the people in the canoe paddling on purpose, or are they just drifting, maybe lost at sea? And finally, you hit the go button and let the computer run hundreds of these virtual trips to see how many succeed.
So what did all this digital seafaring actually show us? Well, the results were stunning. They didn't just tweak the old theory a little bit. They completely flipped it on its head and revealed new migration pathways nobody had seriously considered before. For the experiment, the simulations were launched from 3 main staging areas, the most logical starting points for anyone trying to get into the Caribbean. You had Florida up north, the Yucatan Peninsula to the west, and the long coastline of northern South America to the south. The question was, which of these routes was actually viable? The results from the first 2 spots were, well, pretty eye-opening. If you just drifted from the Yucatan, your chances of hitting Cuba were almost 0. You can see how the currents just sweep everything away into the Gulf of Mexico. The success rate was a tiny 1.67%. Coming from Florida was a bit better, at 3.5%, but it was still really tricky and depended heavily on the time of year. These were definitely not migration superhighways. But then, they ran the simulations from South America. And this is where everything changed. What the model showed was that if you set a canoe adrift from a huge stretch of that South American coast, it had an incredibly high chance of landing somewhere in the Greater Antilles. The winds and currents literally create a natural corridor that points right at the island. And the number that proves it is just staggering, an 11.08% success rate. Now remember, that's for an accidental drift voyage. That's a massive number, way higher than from any other direction. This wasn't just a fluke, it was a probability. The data was clear. The main wave of migration almost certainly came from the south. So this lets us put the old idea and the new one side by side.
The old stepping stone view imagined people with limited sailing skills, making one-way trips that led to isolated cultures. But the new view, backed by the simulations, shows us expert seafarers who are capable of two-way travel, creating this dynamic, interconnected hub of cultures across the Caribbean.
So what does this all really mean for how we see the Taíno people? It means they were far, far more connected and, frankly, more sophisticated than we ever gave them credit for.
See, these simulations aren't just a fancy computer game. They give us a whole new framework for looking at the actual artifacts that archaeologists have been finding for decades. And when you look again with this new understanding, you realize the evidence for constant two-way contact with the mainland has been hiding in plain sight all along. This wasn't a one-and-done migration, it was an ongoing relationship.
And the proof is right there in the ground. We find plants and animals on the islands that had to have been brought over from the mainland. We find metals and polished stones that could only have come from there. And beyond just things, you see these deep connections in culture, in the way they made tools, in their traditions, showing a constant exchange of people, goods, and ideas.
And this quote from the source material just sums it all up perfectly. The Taíno weren't just islanders. They were a true maritime people. They were the descendants of a 6,000-year-old tradition of mastering the sea, and they were on a path to becoming a major seafaring power in the Americas.
And that leaves us with this incredible what-if question to think about. What if history had gone differently? Imagine a fully developed, interconnected Taíno civilization with trade and contact all up and down the American continents. How would that have changed everything we know about the history of the Americas? It's really something to ponder. We hope that you liked today's explainer. Please share your comments and subscribe to explore other similar opportunities. Post your questions in the comments section for future videos.